There are battles happening inside you, every single day, subtle wars you barely notice, not because they're too faint to detect, but because they've become familiar, woven into the background of your life. They don't knock on the door of your consciousness. They don't keep you awake in one dramatic night of struggle. Instead, they work silently, quietly eroding you from within, not through pleasure, but through compromise of the soul. Carl Jung once said, "What we do not make conscious will return in our lives as fate." Yet fate rarely comes crashing down as a great catastrophe. More often, it slips in disguised as a harmless habit, so ordinary that it goes unnoticed until it has shaped the course of your life. In today's world, people fear pornography, and rightly so, for it distorts intimacy and poisons the mind. But there are forces even more insidious, far quieter, and far deeper, the mental habits that steal your faith in yourself. The subtle choices that blur the image of the man you're trying to become. They don't make headlines. They're not the subject of viral challenges, and precisely because they seem so unremarkable, they are the most dangerous. Jung believed that when a man loses belief in the light of his own future, he begins to rot in the shadow of old age, and the greatest shadow is not fear of failure. It is the belief that effort itself is meaningless. This cynicism does not spring from wisdom. It is born of wounds, of disappointments, of countless broken promises to oneself. Every time you set a goal and abandon it, every time you vow to change, but fall back into the same patterns, in those moments you lose more than time, you lose faith in your own word, and with it, the ability to believe in any new beginning at all. First, you stop trusting others' promises, then far worse, you stop trusting your own capacity to change. This lack of faith decides everything. You delay simple actions because you whisper to yourself, "It won't matter." You feel uneasy around disciplined people because they reflect your neglect back to you. You surround yourself with others who stagnate, not to uplift each other, but to create excuses for staying the same. These comfortable circles become invisible prisons, walls disguised as friendships. Jung called this a collective infection of the shadow, a condition where the individual stops steering his own will and is instead swept along by the unconscious current of mass resignation. Perhaps the most terrifying part isn't giving up. It's convincing yourself you're still trying. You write plans, you read books, you dream of success, but in reality, you never step outside your comfort zone. Here, the myth of good intentions takes root, one of the most subtle escape mechanisms of all. You imagine your goal and mistake the dopamine rush of visualization for progress, but no action follows, no step is taken. Jung warned against this trap. Identification with the ideal image, a state where a man feels valuable merely because he thinks lofty thoughts. But psychology teaches us this does not lead to growth. It leads to illusion. And when illusion is not exposed, it becomes a spiritual prison. You live in your head, not in the world. When asked what you're doing, you answer, "I have plans." When you fail, you comfort yourself. "At least I had good intentions." But Jung was clear. Enlightenment does not come from imagining the light. It comes from making the darkness conscious. Progress is not built on daydreams or noble intentions. It is built on the raw courage to face the very things you avoid, your procrastination, your fear, your lack of discipline. Paradoxically, when a person starts losing faith in themselves, they don't seek solitude to heal. Instead, unconsciously, they cling to those who carry the same fatigue within them. It's not a conscious choice, it's resonance, a quiet harmony between souls, searching for an excuse not to change anything. They tell each other that life is hard, that not everyone can succeed, that effort is a form of self-torture if it doesn't bring the expected results. These conversations don't heal, they cement fear. They are a collective justification for stagnation. Carl Jung called this psychological infection in the collective unconscious, the moment when the individual dissolves into the group to avoid confronting their own uniqueness, their own light, and when you remain in such an environment long enough, doubt ceases to be a reaction. It becomes a worldview. You no longer think of yourself as someone disappointed. You believe the world is one big disappointment. You no longer think only, you delay action. You believe action itself is foolishness, and so unnoticed, you install an invisible armor inside yourself. I know, I tried, nothing works. It's not knowledge. It's not wisdom. It's an empty shell built on unprocessed pain. It's not a lesson. It's a wall that doesn't let any new idea break through. When someone says they're developing, trying, changing, you smile inwardly with irony. They'll eventually see how it really looks. But what does really mean? Your reality, or the one you accepted as the only possible because you were too tired to fight it? Jung repeated, if you want to individuate, you must break free from the influence of the collective. But breaking free doesn't mean rejecting the world. It means waking up while others are asleep. It means maintaining the fire of will, even when the wind of collective doubt blows around you. And that is damn difficult, because humans naturally desire belonging. If the price of belonging is giving up dreams, many will pay it silently. They will speak less about what they truly desire, and more about why it's not worth desiring. They become masters of risk analysis, but children when it comes to taking even the simplest actions, because when you equate failure with shame, every step forward feels like risking humiliation. That's why so many choose silence instead of beginnings, procrastination instead of visible failure. But Jung would say clearly, it is precisely this repeated passivity that is the real failure, the failure of the soul. Then the shadow stops being something to integrate and begins ruling you entirely. Such a person may still go to work, talk, laugh, but they no longer have contact with the part of themselves capable of growth. They live as if everything was already decided, as if they were a failure wrapped in a cloak of pseudo-knowledge, and when this narrative becomes identity, they will defend it like a fortress. They will reject every suggestion of change, attack those who stand out, and secretly hope that no one in their circle achieves too quick a success, because that would force them to face the truth they've been running from for years. And in this defense, forget what Jung repeated most loudly. The shadow becomes dangerous only when you don't recognize it. The shadow cannot be destroyed, but its influence can be weakened through the courage to see it where it truly lives. In the people you choose as companions, in the conversations you repeat endlessly, and in that quiet, lingering silence between the last action and the next one you still haven't taken. At this point, a question might arise in your mind. Why do I feel like I'm trying when nothing changes? That's exactly the subtle trap of a certain form of self-delusion, a place where intentions disguise themselves as actions, where satisfaction comes more from planning than from execution. In modern psychology, this phenomenon is referred to as a false dopaminergic reward, but Jung understood this mechanism much earlier. It's the moment when the mind identifies so strongly with the ideal image of oneself that it begins to believe that thinking alone is a step forward. You imagine that you'll write a book, change your lifestyle, build a career, and every time you imagine it, you feel a small wave of pleasure, as if part of you has already achieved something. But the truth is, it's not you developing, it's your ego being stroked, and that creates a very insidious, vicious cycle. The more you think, the more you feel like you're acting, and the more you feel like you're acting, the less you actually do. Jung would call this identifying with an unintegrated symbol. That is admiring the image of who you want to be, without ever starting the journey that could take you there. Instead, you return to the design phase, for the 17th time. New strategy, new table, new schedule down to the hour. But when the time for action comes, the familiar sentence appears, not yet the right moment. There is nothing that kills self-worth faster than constantly postponing things you yourself labeled important. Every such later is not just lost time. It's a signal you send to your subconscious. You can't trust me. And when that signal repeats too often, you stop believing even in your own good intentions, because deep down, you know you'll postpone again. But why do you do it? Because planning doesn't require courage. Because imagination doesn't expose you to rejection. Because thoughts are never judged. It's absolute safety. Carl Jung once said, There is no awakening without pain, and most people avoid that pain by escaping into the world of imagination, where everything can be controlled, where risk is only a simulation and failure doesn't exist. But that means one thing: success is also just an illusion. You are not living the life you desire. You are living its mental version. And then comes the most dangerous moment. You begin to believe that if you prepare well enough, someday you will finally begin with no fear, no doubts, no internal conflict. But that day will never come. There is no morning when you wake up fully convinced, fearless, ready for everything. That doesn't exist. But you've learned to believe that feeling safe is a prerequisite for beginning. And that is the most beautiful lie the shadow whispers to you every morning. Jung would never tell you wait until you stop being afraid. He would rather say that only real imperfect flawed action can break the illusion, because only in action do you see that you are not the image in your head. You are the one who has the courage to live, despite uncertainty. That is the first step toward the process of individuation, becoming yourself, not who others think you should be, not who your ego wants to believe you are, but who you are in the process of becoming step by step. And that path always requires leaving behind the safe harbor you so carefully named preparation. When a person lives too long in the zone of preparation, plans, and imagination, what they truly lose is not time, it's their sense of self-worth. Because every time you delay something you yourself declared important, a part of you sees that you didn't keep the promise you made to yourself. And if this happens often enough, you no longer need anyone else to doubt you. You'll do it yourself. Carl Jung wrote that the shadow is not only what you hide from others, it is also what you deny in your own heart. And eroded self-esteem is one of those fragments of the shadow. Unlike fear, which is visible on the outside in trembling hands and eyes, it operates quietly, secretly. It robs you of the courage to dream on a grand scale. It robs you of the belief that you deserve more. You don't reject opportunities because you don't see them. You reject them because you don't believe they're meant for you. Take Adrian's story, a man with a dream to become a writer. For years he read about writing techniques, analyzed storytelling structures, created outlines for 3 different books, but never finished even the first chapter. When asked why, he replied, "I'm still preparing. I'm not ready yet." But beneath these words lay a simpler truth. Adrian didn't believe he deserved to be a writer. Every time he thought about finishing a book, a voice in his head said, "No one will read it. No one cares. And if it turns out bad, you'll lose the only dream that makes you feel special." And so this unfulfilled dream became his last refuge. Because as long as he didn't realize it, he could continue imagining it. But if he tried and failed, the entire illusion would shatter. This is the most subtle form of escape. Not from failure, but from losing something that gives you meaning. Jung would say, if you do not confront your shadow, it will guide your life, and you will call it fate. And so it was with Adrian. He wasn't lacking knowledge nor opportunity. He was paralyzed by a lack of self-trust, and that is the greatest paradox. It is precisely the lack of action that prevents rebuilding that trust. An unconscious loop forms. The more you wait for readiness, the more you delay. The more you delay, the less you believe in yourself. And the less you believe, the more helpless you feel. And when you live in this loop too long, you begin to believe it's your nature. You no longer say, "I postponed writing." You say, "I'm not disciplined." You don't say, "I'm afraid of judgment." You say, "This isn't for me. I'm not cut out for it." And these words, these narratives, begin to shape your identity. And when something becomes part of your identity, change becomes painful. Jung called this identification with the shadow. The moment you stop seeing the difference between who you are and what you fear within yourself. And that is the critical point in psychological development. Either you awaken and begin separating yourself from the shell formed around your wounds, or you live forever trapped within the confines of your limited ego. It doesn't happen suddenly, but it always begins with one small moment. The moment you accept your stagnation as normal, from that moment on, your great dreams begin to fade, to quiet down, not because you no longer want them, but because you no longer want to face the shame if they don't come true. But strangely, sometimes it takes just one small step for everything to begin changing. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't have to be the best version of yourself. You don't need certainty or great motivation. Just one movement so small that no one else might notice. But for you, it's a sign of a beginning. Because liberation doesn't come when you feel strong enough. It comes when you accept that you'll never be completely ready, and you move forward anyway. Carl Jung once said, "The way to enlightenment leads through darkness." That means you cannot sit around waiting for fear to vanish. You must learn to walk with it. Don't wait until confidence magically appears. Move forward anyway, step by step, rebuilding trust in yourself. Self-belief doesn't exist before you start. It's not a gift waiting on the path. It's something you forge through consistent, concrete actions. Small, repeatable acts. No spotlight, no applause. It could be writing 100 words each day. It could be refusing a conversation that wastes your time. It could be something as ordinary as waking up on time for 3 mornings in a row. Small details, yes, but these are the bricks that rebuild your relationship with yourself. And once that relationship is repaired, it becomes the foundation for every real change. Jung taught that individuation, the becoming of your truest self, demands that you move beyond the mask you've worn. The image built from fear, disappointment, and old stories of failure must be left behind. And that means one thing: you cannot wait for inspiration. You must walk into discomfort, even if it brings mockery, doubt, or dismissive stares, because only in that confrontation does something new emerge. A true individual is not created by sidestepping pain. They are shaped by entering it willingly and still choosing life within it. Jung observed, "The ego seeks protection, but the soul seeks growth, and these two rarely go hand in hand. If you keep waiting until the hurt disappears, growth will never come." The soul doesn't want escape. It wants your presence, your decision, your courage. At some point you must choose: continue as a version of yourself who avoids discomfort, or step forward as someone real, someone who may be hurt, but who grows because of it. And the final lesson is this: stop deceiving yourself with more plans, more words, or false empathy from people who are lying to themselves the same way you are. Start with the smallest action. Don't measure it by speed or results. Measure it by the courage it awakens within you. Each time you do this, you rewrite the story you carry inside, until one day you won't need to imagine a stronger version of yourself. You will live it. Not through perfection, but through honesty. Not through certainty, but through courage, built step by step. This is the path Jung called individuation. No one else can walk it for you, but once you begin, no one can take it away.